Good morning, good morning. Welcome to the 43rd CALLERLAB convention here in Norfolk, Virginia. Today is Tuesday, March 22nd, 2016. My name is Ken Ritucci. I'll be the moderator for this session called If We Tell You, We Will Have to Kill You. I think that's a pretty cool title. My panelist to my left is the one and only Mr. Mike Sikorsky. We're glad to have Mike with us. One quick note, I've been asked to announce that Paul Cote now has a Hilton booth set up at the end of the hall. So go by, and you've already bought something. Two people have already bought something. Okay. But I think he's got a 220 down there with your name on it, Lynn. Anyway, I'm going to...
birthday coming if you'd like to help out.
Do I get better spots?
That could be arranged if I get a new 220.
Well, and again, we do have one wireless mic, so we'd ask that when you have comments or questions that you use the mic and introduce who you are before you start speaking. And just a couple of opening comments, then I'm going to turn it over to Mike about, we thought this would be a sort of a different or interesting type of session. We get asked many times, I know I do, and I'm sure Mike does when we're traveling, I get asked by callers, how do you get started? How do you get dates away from your area? And I don't know if there's any easy answer. Everybody takes different roads, But Mike and I put out two different types of handouts. I noticed that the things he's talking about in some ways are not the things I'm talking about, which is good. So we feel that we'll have a well-rounded presentation. There are handouts here at the front of the table if anyone would like one. But traveling could be fun. It's exciting, tiring, stressful. You're going to have your ups and your downs if you decide you want to travel. And I guess the key things are you have to decide how much you want to travel. Everybody's situation is different. Some people might have, if you have a full-time job, you're obviously going to be limited by the kind of traveling you're going to be doing. If you happen to retire and you have plenty of time on your hands, then you have more time to travel. But I have some other comments to say, but I'm going to let Mike start. He's got a lot of good information, and so without further ado, Mr. Mike Sikorsky.
All right, good morning. Everybody's got the handout, right? Okay, we'll dive right in. I decided to repeat the first word 4 times because I didn't think 3 was enough. Network, 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 network. Quick personal story. My first CALLERLAB was 1976. And I met, among several people I handed business cards to, I met Dave Abbott. And when he opened McLeod Dance Country in 1979, I worked there in 1980, and I called there every summer for 33 straight years. You just don't know. You just don't know. So, always have business cards and offer one. You don't have to hand it to them. Business cards cost money. And put a picture on that business card where if they look at it later, they know who you are. I've seen some business cards where the picture is the size of the end of this ballpoint pen here. And basic information on the card, but get that picture big enough so if they pick it up, so, oh yeah, I danced to that person, right? Or I met that person. Now the second one says, make sure you have a branding photo. Branding's a tough concept. Does everybody know what branding means?
Marketing?
If you want to travel, it's particularly important. If you're calling locally and stuff, it's not as important because you get to know all the people and you sort of craft what you do and they know who you are and everything's good. A branding photo is, a brand is how someone else perceives you. So every dancer, every person you meet, they will brand you in their own mind. And what you want to do is control how that brand, as much as you can, how that brand is created. So I sort of want the same kind of brand created in your mind, in your mind, in your mind, in your mind, in your mind. So my brand is, I'm an entertaining, fun guy. part of my brand is I'm here to do my best to share information. What's your brand? Make your photo like that. Is your brand the professional photo you went to a studio to prepare? Is that what you want? Is that what you want out there? Or do you want someone taking a shot of you while you're actually calling a dance? And if you do that, get yourself a good photo editor for free, like Photoscape or something like that, so you can crop it and change the lighting a little bit and do that sort of thing. Okay. Does everybody understand what an elevator speech is?
Give me yours.
I'm sorry, did you look at me or him? I'm looking right square into the light behind you.
You.
My contact lenses are going zzz. Okay.
You.
My branding speech. Hey, I'm Mike Sikorsky. I've been calling 44 years. I am an accredited caller coach. I'm also a singer-songwriter. I've toured all over the world. And what do you do?
You don't
Used
have
to
much
be-
time for your elevator.
When I say it's a when I say I'm a square dance caller, I either get "You're a what?" or I get "That's cool." I don't get that old swing your partner stuff we got 20 years ago. I don't hear that anymore. And I talk to a lot of people sitting next to me on airplanes that have nothing to do with anything. And you never know who you're going to meet either. I met Charlie Pride in an airport. Now, be prepared to tell that elevator speech to anyone who appears interested. Don't just offer it. People sometimes we have the tendency to enter conversation because we've reminded ourselves of something to say. If you can turn that around and give your elevator speech and ask, hey, what do you do? And then ask a question based on something they said. And then they talk a little. Maybe you can ask another question based on something they said. Or maybe they said something that reminded you of a story you want to tell, and then you do. Now you've engaged people on their terms, and that's part of branding too. Read the first 5 words of 1D, because that's a hard one to get through a square dance caller's head. Be prepared to shut up. That's a hard one. Because you'll start talking and they'll find a way to turn their head away or try to change the subject or etc. Just, you can't force your information on people. You'd be surprised the number of colors I look at, and I'm thinking of item 2A here, garment colors are complementary. I'm thinking, where is the style police here? And I'm not specifically talking about this meeting here, but I am talking about national conventions and this sort of thing. If you have to find a person that can help you decide what works and what doesn't, you do that. Okay. I'm a firm believer in 2B here. It says you are slightly overdressed for the occasion, in a way that you can dress down if you need to, but you're comfortable. Always be just a cut. That's part of my brand. Always be just a cut above what's going on around you. I think that's very, very important, particularly if you wish to tour, because you never have a second chance to make a first impression. And if you want to tour, you're going to be making lots of first impressions. Now 2C is a tender subject. Make physical changes to make the clothes look better on you. I want to speak directly to the guys, because women, you have a woman talk to you. If you can't stand up like your grandma told you, like this, and look down, pull your shirt back, and see your belt buckle, we've got work to do, guys. And if you do look like this, you still got work to do, because if you can now, you'll be a can't soon. I mean, what do you want your business card to be? What you hand them, or what's hanging over your belt? Because that's what they'll notice first. And I'll say one more thing about it. I read Men's Health magazine cover to cover, and they have medical snippets in there. And guys, it is medically documented that the grander we are above the belt, the less grand we are below. So I'm saying our profession needs to shape up all across the board. Okay, I'll move along. Smile. Power team is a hard thing. How many of the callers, you callers in this room, or callers, partners in this room, think you have friends that are square dancers who pay and come to your dances? They pay admission to dance to you. How many of you think you have friends that do that? Okay. I know who, Lynn, I know who you're talking about, and I think you're right. But in a vast majority of cases, is this a smile for? Yeah, I got to smile for that one. Normally it's like, hey, Mike, what? In a vast majority of cases, the people that pay to dance to us, and yes, they seem like friends, they're clients. They're really not friends. They're clients. And so in building a power team, you work through and you befriend these people that are clients. And there will come a time when they get close enough to you personally that something you do, they object to. Or they do that you object to. And remember, whether you're doing it for your living or you're doing it part-time, this is your brand. You got to care for it. You're going to have that conversation with people and be prepared to not continue to try to build a friendship from that client. That doesn't mean you blow them off. Now, I can think of one couple in your case that absolutely is the best couple you could ever have in your back pocket. So you've got one.
I've got two.
Okay, well, that makes you a lot better than about 95% of the callers. And it takes a long time to build that, doesn't it? And it goes through these trials and tribulations, and they did something that hurt you, and you had to talk to them. And you did something that they didn't like, and we had to talk it out. And because you both decided to give each other the space you needed, it works. That's a power team, because those are the people you can go to. Because particularly when you're on the road, it's up and down emotionally, up and down. And you've got to have those people you can talk to. Now, see, we always see ourselves through our own mind's eye, which is always personally jaded by our intentions. So we see ourselves by our intentions, but everybody else sees us by our actions. So we need to have people we can trust, just like two couples you're talking about. We need to have people we can trust. We can go to and say, how did I go over tonight? And they will be honest with you. And if it's not so good, they'll be kind in how they say it, because your heart is important too. Doran, we have handouts here if you'd like to grab a couple of them. I am so tired. Number 4, I'm so incredibly tired of hearing a new caller come up to me and tell me everything they are doing. I don't want to hear a new caller tell me what they're doing. I want to hear dancers tell me about what they're doing. And I can think of one particular caller who I will not name, who I literally had 24 dancers from this club show up my dance and say, oh, so-and-so, oh, he's brand new, but boy, he's doing a good job, and we're just having a lot of fun, and blah, blah, blah. And I went and talked to him, and he said, I'm trying. I'm working really hard, and I'm trying, and they're hanging with me, but we're doing this. We're having a good time. Talked to him a year later. The dancers weren't singing his praises anymore, and he was telling me all about his greatness. I don't want to hear. That's arrogance, and that's not good. Okay, the last one, be prepared. Be prepared. You might have to, now, let me finish the sentence, because be prepared. Who learned me how to spoke anyway? Be prepared. But if you want to build a tour, typically you're going to find a dance. Somebody says, hey, we want to book you. And so I'm in Arizona, and somebody says to me, we're upstate New York. We want you to call our anniversary dance. Okay, Well, I'm looking at $400 to $500 round trip airfare. Typically they'd be willing to put you up in a house or pay for your hotel. They will not pay you enough money to pay for that airfare, but they'll feed you. Do you want to tour that area? Make your decisions carefully and try to book your tour out around an airport where you think you can fly into the most reasonably priced. So you can check just from your own area. If I fly to Nashville, or if I fly to Charlotte, or if I fly to Atlanta, for that whole southeast area there, you can fly to any one of those three airports. Birmingham also works. So you check them all, find out which is the best one. And then when you book that dance, you ask them if hey, is there somebody else I could pick up the next night? Boy, if I could pick up 3 in a row, that'd be really cool. But that physical conditioning thing is important. And then I'll take questions. There is a time every June where I call in Richmond, Virginia, and I drive 7 hours and call south of Knoxville, and I drive another 6.5 and call in West End, North Carolina. And I get up in the morning, I drive 4.5 hours to call in Land Harbor up above Asheville, and I have to be there to start advanced at 1 o'clock. You have to be able to drive 7 hours and call, drive 7 hours and call, drive 7 hours and call, drive 7 hours and call the best dance you've ever done. Every time to people you've never seen. Now, if you're prepared to do that, I know a guy that said he drove 8 hours for a dance, and when he got there, they were so happy. They wanted to do this every year, and by the time he got done calling the dance, they weren't asking him to come back anymore. He told me that story. He said, worst day of his life. He did not want to be a road caller. Any questions?
Well, I got a few comments, then we'll open it up to the floor because we got a great group of people here, some that actually do travel. Mike touched on some good things. One thing I'll circle back to was business cards. I agree. You should have your picture on your business card. You should have a business card. And maybe you should update your business card. If you know your picture's 20 years old, it's time to get a new one. But I always put business cards out at the table, at the flyers, wherever I am at a dance. I put them in the corner somewhere. And I'll just lay maybe 3 or 4 out, and then I walk by and just see if any pick them up. It's just something I do just to see if someone takes your card. But always do that. Lay them out somewhere. I broke my ideas down on why to book traveling calling dates and how to book them, and then answering questions that you have to answer. One is determine where and when you want to go, depending on your personal schedule. If you have a very busy home schedule and you're calling 4 or 5 nights a week, you might not have much time to travel at all. Is this something you just want to do a couple weekends a year? Is this something you want to do a lot? Only you can determine that. Determine your purpose for traveling. Mike had a good example. He lives in Arizona. Somebody in New York wants to book him for a dance. Well, that's all well and good. But if he's only got that one dance, he has to travel all the way across the country to do it. Most likely he's not going to make any money on it. But sometimes, and I've had to do this, we have to travel the first time around or so, especially if it's overseas and you don't make money. You take a loss because you're trying to build for the future. And of course, you start networking. You always got to network, because the first thing you'll do is say, well, yeah, I'd like to come back, but, can you help me with this dance? There are certain parts of this country, and certainly overseas, where you just hit the jackpot with somebody in an area. I'm very fortunate with, and as you are too, probably Kathy in Denver. Kathy Winston in Denver is just wonderful. She just, as Bob, as you know, she'll just say, okay, when are you coming out? Well, you can do this Rocky Tops on Thursdays, and then these dance on Friday. I'll contact them. No, I'll get you the Saturday. What do you want to do on Sunday? I mean, that's a dream. We'd all love to have one person that can say, when are you coming out? I'll give you 5 nights in a row. But it doesn't always happen that way. That's rare. Determine the financial outcome. Are you willing to take a loss? Or if you're not willing to take a loss, then maybe traveling isn't for you, because sometimes you're going to, the better you get at it, then the more you'll be positive on your trips as opposed to negative. But you got to cut your teeth. You got to pay your dues. And if you're not willing to do that, then maybe traveling isn't for you. Do some research on the geographical area concerning the number of clubs. If you're going to start taking some dates. Maybe you live in New England. You're going to go down to, I don't know, South Carolina. Well, look around what's in South Carolina. Make some contacts. Maybe there's some callers in the area you might know. Reach out. But do some research before you just get in the car. Mike talked about traveling 8 hours here and the next day 7 hours here. And I remember some of the old stories from some of the legends years ago. They would sleep in their car, to get to the next dance and everything. I mean, that's not the kind of travel I want to do. And I don't. But years ago they did. I've heard those stories. You've heard them. But these guys would travel like all night and they'd sleep in their car just to get up for the next dance. It's not something I want to do. Number 5, can you live with the outcome? Are you going to be happy with whatever you book? If it's, you'll know. I mean, granted, you're going to be a different face coming in, and people are most likely going to give you a very positive response. Especially at the programs like Mainstream and Plus. I know if you start to travel and do the higher programs, specifically Challenge or High Challenge, you better be prepared more than just travel. You better be prepared to be able to call the material and entertain the dancers, because you don't get a second chance to make a good first impression, especially at what I find at the higher programs. How to book traveling calling dates. Reach out to callers, network. Callers that you might know in the area. Callers you make friends at CALLERLAB. How many brought business cards to this convention? Good. You should be handing them out. You introduce somebody and say, hi, I'm Jim Denegris from Connecticut, and hi, I'm Bob Riggs from Denver, and maybe swap cards. And lots of times callers can help callers. You say, well, I have to be, some might say, I have to be in your area for a wedding or something. Can you think of any clubs that might want an outside caller? And most of the time, callers will help you out. And then down the road, the callers will say, the other caller might say, well, I have to go out to New England for something, and is there any chance of picking up a dance? I mean, this is the best place to do it. Callers with callers. Hand out some business cards, even if it's overseas as well. You never know. Something may come of it. Something may not come of it. But if you don't hand out those cards and shake hands and introduce yourself, then you're not going to be doing much traveling. You have to take the initiative. And you have to be good about it. You can't be pushy, and you can't be, too persistent about it. But a simple handshake and exchange of cards, get to know each other. Another good place that happens, and this, is caller schools. Students come, from all over, and most of them have cards, and they make great contacts with each other and say, hey, and they maybe at the end of the school, but they're getting up doing a duet or something. They're practicing. They're having fun. They become friends. I can't tell you the amount of callers at the schools that I've done that nowadays, now they're traveling. Maybe they're doing a festival together or something. You don't know what you don't know, so don't take anything for granted. Perhaps suggest doing, like I said, doing a joint dance with the caller. Hey, let's do a dance together. And then maybe reciprocate in your area. Bring someone in. Do a dance together. Festival calling can get you great exposure. Obviously, council dances, all these types of dances that are around the country or overseas, specials, things that bring in a lot of different dancers from different clubs, festivals and weekends, things like that. That's going to give you more exposure. Of course, the question people ask, well, how do you get festivals? You sort of get festivals by traveling, and sometimes, you may get a dance in an area, and then somebody who's president of the council will come up to you and say, every October we have an annual council dance, and, would you consider wanting to do one of those? And then you say, well, sure, because look at the exposure you're going to get. Now you're going to get all these clubs are going to come. So now you have a lot more opportunity. But you have to work your craft, too. I mean, you got to really work at what you're doing. If successful, try to rebook the same time next year. I know Mike's very good about that. Ed Foot's really good about that. Ed Foot, he's not an electronic guru, but, he got his little book with him. And what he does is he goes right up to the club at that night, and he'll say, now, next year, how about the same date? I'm going to be here again. I'm coming through. And, he works those tours. He does Florida and he does California in the summer. He comes to New England twice a year, does New Jersey and parts of New York. And he's been doing it for many, many years. So if you see Ed in the hallway, stop and pick his brain and say, how successful are you? Well, because he doesn't let it go. He doesn't say, hey, I had a great time, and leave the area, leave that club, and not talk to him again. He tries to do it right then and there. Now, some people can get away with that. Ed has established himself. But sometimes that doesn't always work, especially if you're a new traveling caller. Because sometimes the club may say, well, we're already booked through 2019 or something, Just go to Southern California. They love to do that, And one club's booking for the 6 months down the road, and then another club says, we're booked through 2020. And someone says they're booked through 2020, there's not much you can say to them. Well, consider me for 2021, It doesn't always work. Be flexible with the dates if you need to be. If you're serious about wanting to travel, don't have your date set in stone. If the club says, well, we already got next October booked, but we have some openings in the other parts of the year. Be flexible, check your calendar. I always say things like, well, I'm sure we can work something out. Let me know, send me some dates. Here's my card, email me, and I'll get back to you. And if they email you, get back to them. I always try to get back to them within 24 hours. Especially nowadays with smartphones. And if you have a smartphone, you get your email here. There's no reason why even if you don't have your calendar, just quickly reply back saying, hey, thank you for reaching out to me. I don't have my calendar with me right now, but as soon as I get home, I'm so-and-so, and I will get back to you. That's really important. That's being very professional. You have to follow up, and people like quick responses. You ever get any emails back from someone saying, hey, thanks for getting back to me so soon? People like that. It's the one. Or have you ever heard of stories where dancers will say, I don't know, I wrote to so-and-so 3 months ago, and they haven't gotten back to me at all yet. I mean, I've heard that a lot. That's not being professional. And if you're going to be a traveling caller, you're not going to operate very long doing it that way. Mike, if you have any things you can chip in. And then answer the following questions. Were you successful when you get home? Was the trip successful? Was it worth it? Not always did I make money, because in some cases you might not. You may have to, like I said, cut your teeth, take a loss. Not everything's always going to be financially sound, but the better you get at it, the more money you should be on the positive side. Was it financially feasible? That's my number 2. Did the time away from home bother you? I say that because I've heard of callers who start to do this, and then they start to say, I don't like being away from home that much anymore. Or there might be circumstances at home, maybe a relative has gotten ill, or maybe they have to take care of a sick mother or father, or something with the family, and then they realize that, they can't travel like they really want to. Traveling is not for everybody. I always make fun of it at dances. I said, hey, especially when I'm trying to promote people that might want to be a caller, I say, does anybody want to get into this fabulous, sexy, entertaining, rich industry of calling? And they all laugh. And I always say something like, well, if you find anyone, let me know. But there's a lot of truth to that. It is fun. It's exciting. We all have egos. It's great. It's nice to, to be able to do this stuff if you can do it, but not everybody can do it. And then number 4, would you do the same trip again? Would you do it again? Only you can ask those questions. You don't know. There's trips I don't do anymore because it's something that I feel that it's not beneficial for me. And so I've canceled some of going to certain areas at this point in time because I'm still in the work market and I'm still actively looking for a full-time job right now. And should that happen, that would change my personal schedule as well. But if you're retired and you have the time, Bob, are you retired? A year and a half. Oh, from now? Okay, yeah. I mean, if you're retired, you got time to do it. Do it. It could be a lot of fun, but I get asked many times by callers, especially in my area, they'll say, how do you break out? Don't be afraid to come up to someone like Mike or myself. I mean, I'm always willing to give a name to a club. And then I always get asked sometimes to say, well, how much do you charge? I got a call from a club, like there's one New England caller, and he'll say, I got a call from a club in Maryland, and they want me to come down to do a dance, but I don't know what to charge. And I'll give them my opinion, but I feel if you're going to drive 5 or 6 or 7 hours, I certainly wouldn't give them the same fee as if you're driving an hour and a half within the state of Connecticut or something. I mean, you're worth more than that. Come on. They probably have heard you, and they want you, so they understand. Most clubs understand. There are some who still don't understand. They still want you for what they pay, their local caller, and you have to make that determined. Do you want to drive 5 hours to get the same amount of money they pay their club caller? I don't know. That's up for you to decide. Personally, I don't think so. I wouldn't want to do it, but most clubs understand, and if they've reached out to you, to go from New England to Maryland's about 5 hours or so driving, well, don't be afraid. Be proud of the number you give them, and remember, you can always go lower. You can't go higher. If you go too low, they'll say, hey, that's great. We'll send you a contract. And you might have left a lot of money on the table. But if you go too high, well, then now you can sort of maybe see where they are. Well, we don't really pay that much, but we could probably do this. So, okay, so you didn't get this, but you might have gotten this instead of starting out here. Don't be so hungry or you'll say, I'll do it for free. Yeah, sure, I don't need money. I'll just come down and call a dance. Mike says that all the time. No. That's why he's so busy. No, but seriously, think about what you want to do. Where do you want to be a regional caller? Like region could be anything. Do you want to be a large regional caller? Somebody says, well, I want to be a national caller. Well, you don't become a national caller overnight. And what is a national caller? Some people have different opinions of national. I want to be an international caller. So what's an international caller? Well, I called in Canada once. If you're over here in the States, I'm international now, I crossed the Canadian border. But international calling is a lot of fun as well. And be prepared for that because there's all types of different countries and they're similar, but they're different. And that's another whole ball of wax too. But if you're looking just to branch out within the States, I say go for it. I mean, clubs are always looking for different names. Comments, questions? Well, where's the microphone? Yeah, please state your name. Yeah, state your name and then where you're from and all that.
Lynn Nelson, Kansas City, Kansas. I'm wondering, and Mike knows, in our area, in Kansas City, it's a good-sized city. However, if we put too many dances too close together, you could get one big dance and make just as much money as you make with 3 or 4 within a week, because they'll pick and choose what night they want to come, and they won't come 2 nights that week. So how far apart? You did that one year, and it killed you. All 3 dances. It did. It killed all 3 dances. We used to have 12, 14, 15 squares, and we got like 6 because he got 3 the next night and 4 some other night, and he could have did a whole lot less work and got the same amount of money, and maybe stayed. I'm in favor of that concept right there. And so, how far apart do you think the dances need to be?
Yeah, that's very area dependent. I had no idea that Topeka, Kansas, which is 45 minutes from your dance, because in California, if I put one in Orange County and one in the San Fernando Valley, that's 45 minutes apart. At 3 in the morning, it's 45 minutes apart. Yeah. But you got to ask the clubs. You got to ask whoever's putting on that dance, where can I book another dance, or can you recommend another dance I do that is not going to draw against this one? Get that information from the local. And I got myself in some big PR trouble several years ago because I booked a dance on the phone and I had not looked at the contract of another festival. and they put that thing in no dance within X number of miles. I don't sign those contracts anymore. You tell me specifically what areas you don't want me to call in. You don't want me to call in Greater Kansas City. Don't call in Topeka. Don't, whatever it is, or the surrounding communities, don't give me an idea where I can look it up on the map. Then I can stay away from those areas. That's just a bunch of lazy association people that just want to put a number in there and it's up to me to figure it out. No thanks. I'm not booking them ever again.
Virgil in the back. Yeah, that's important. And then make sure that if you're going to take a date and then you want to get 3 or 4 dates, find out where these are. I try to go at least 2 hours away. And I'll ask the clubs, I'll say, the next night I'm going to be calling it such and such Wheelers or something. Is that going to affect the dance? And, if it's far enough away, they'll say, no, we wouldn't get anybody from that area, Virgil?
Virgil Forbes from Maryland. By the way, the comment you just made was one of them. I booked a dance in Philadelphia, and 2 weeks later I got a call from Harrisburg, I think it was. And I said, well, gee, I'm at Club Sachets in Springfield the night before. Is that a problem? And they said, no, that's an hour away. We're not going to get very much crossover. On money, and let's be real honest, money is how we do it. Even if we're not looking to make a profit and make a living from it, we got to at least break even. And kind of my rule, especially when it's a new club that I've not done before, my formula is essentially $75, the cost of X number of gallons of gas, however far it is round trip, and tolls. And that's my minimum, and if I think I can get a little more out of them, I do. But you got to at least try to break even. I'm calling regionally, 5-state area, and I try to at least break even every time I go out.
Yeah, and right behind you, Mike. Behind you. And then Roy.
Ed McAtee from Washington, D.C. area. So that was one thing I wanted to cover about restrictions in the calling area. But what about if it's different levels? Plus one night, and then say I could book a C2 night. Now, true, all the C2 dancers could come to the plus dance, but probably likely not, so maybe not any crossover whatsoever. So that's not an issue for
no, that's a good point.
Level-wise. Right?
That's a good point. If you call multiple programs, like Ed does and some of us, and you go in, you have a Friday night plus dance, and then the next day you're doing in the same area, you're doing a Saturday afternoon A2 and maybe a Saturday night C1 or whatever. That's not really going to affect because you're not taking away from anybody. So that's a very good point, too. It depends on the programs.
Again, you have to ask whoever's booking you for the dance, what's their opinion of that?
Because it affected him in our area.
Yeah.
For different levels being called?
Well, that's...
He called mainstream, he called advanced, and he called plus, right?
I didn't do it advanced.
With my calendar.
Well,
It wasn't advanced. You're right, it was.
It was advanced.
stay on the mic. Stay on the mic.
Yes, it was advanced. You're right.
Oh, behind you, Roy.
Roy Gotta from New Jersey. We take a little different tact on what you were saying, where you're booked in an area, another club calls you, and you say, well, I'm already booked in this club. Is that going to be a problem? We feel an obligation to the club that booked us first. And we'll say, well, let me check with so-and-so because I don't want to cause problems for both clubs. We're working a half hour from where you are the night before. And if they don't have a problem, and if you don't have a problem, then great, we'll work together. But I was hearing that you talked to the second club. Well, I'm already booked. Is that going to be a problem? I think you have an obligation to the club that brought you in there first to make sure it's not a problem for them.
Yeah, that's another good point. Because I look around the room. Hold on, Marty. Because think about it. If you start to get popular in an area and you go back year after year, don't ever try to hurt the original people that brought you in. I mean, that's the reason why you're there.
We all know callers who shall remain nameless who will call and say, at the last minute say, I'm ill. I can't go. I'm going to send so and so, but in actuality, they've been paid more money because they're going to Europe or they're going to a different part of the United States. Not good. And to Roy, to your point exactly, that is so important. The club that brought you in first, you stay with them. you stay with them until they don't want you anymore, even if there's somebody else that's paying you more money. I had a situation where there was another club within what I thought might be a little too close. And I told them, hey, I got so-and-so booked. And that person said, oh, they're not going to object. You know what? I'm going to go talk to the first club first and find out. I'm going to get it from the horse's mouth. And sure
Absolutely.
enough, yeah, it might hurt us.
Marty, right there. Yeah.
Yeah, Marty, North Carolina. One thing about the caller fees, a lot of times when they've contacted me, I'll talk to the person there on the phone and say, I don't know what's traditional as far as pay in your area. What do you have in your budget for a traveling caller? And usually that's more than what I would ask them to pay me. That's one way that I look at it. And then if their number is not high enough, then of course you have to make the decision whether you're going to go or not. And one other point I want to make is this, back to the expense side of it. I just got off a major tour out of Texas and down around that way. And I was out 11 nights, and not one night did I spend in a motel. All of the host couples kept year after year. I go back to the same people. It's almost like family. I know them better. I see them more than I see my own family. And you build that relationship. Well, in that regard, since you are not paying $125 or $150 a night for a motel room, you can offer them a little bit better price, and you can also network with them as far as next time they come in. Hey, he was here last year. You guys got to come over, and boom, you've got an instant network system build up. And just give them a break on that price, and make sure that you can continue to go back to that same club over and over and over.
We had Art first, and then at first. That was before Art.
Again. So this might go to the title of your workshop, is If I Tell You, I Might Have to Kill You. Can you speak to work visas that may or may not be required when you do call overseas? Or if you prefer not to speak to that.
Ask the local people that are booking you. So you have to obtain that work permit, and they will have to know what port you're going into, and it'll be sitting there waiting for you. You have to get them to do it. They do it. It's your responsibility, because if you get there and they haven't done it, you're stuck. Tell them. They have to get it.
Canada's website has something where you can print out and change the dates. They allow entertainers or something to come in for just a small amount of days. If you get asked at the border, you tell them, be honest, tell them I'm going to call square dance. You can hand them the papers and they look at it. It's normally not a problem, but we have all heard of nightmares of people that have had problems. Yes. Next.
Al Frazier from the Austin, Texas area. Do you ever have a problem? You say you call a caller and ask for if he book you for a dance or something like this, and say he books you for a dance but not his club, and he books a dance and finds a place to dance that's conflict with another club. Do you have any problems with that?
Yeah, personally, I'd have a problem with it. I mean, you're gracious, you're grateful that the caller's doing that, they're making the effort, but you got to, again, if you don't know the area, you got to rely on the people helping you. I mean, if that caller knows that it's going to go up against the club that's nearby, well, that club's going to suffer. Your dance is going to suffer, and then then there's hard feelings, and you don't want to be involved with that.
Sometimes you end up doing that dance anyway because you didn't know, and that's the one you don't. That's the one you don't do again. And if you know that's going to put you in Dutch, you don't book it.
Yeah, there's a no-win situation there.
Art Levine, Hagerstown, Maryland. Question about fees. Do you do a flat fee usually, or do you do a percentage? Because sometimes a lot of people show up at the door.
I work a percentage. I'll do a fee plus or 50% of the door, and then if you have a big crowd, you get more than your fee. If you have a small crowd, you get your fee.
Depends. I get the top traveling caller fee when I go to California because that's where I cut my teeth. Plus, I call it at that big festival in November in California, and I have like 1,200 people. So it's building. It's building. I'm getting new clubs and stuff like that. However, if you're going to tour, you're going to hit some weeknights. You're going to hit a Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and whatever they can pay as you go through. A lot of times it's $250 flat, and we'll feed you and put you up for the night. So and on the one hand, I see what Virgil's saying there, but on the other hand, it's like, how bad do you want to tour? I mean, do you want to do this, or do you want to just sort of go to an area because you want to do some touristy things and you want to write it off on your taxes? Well, that's one approach. You might make a friend there. You might be able to tour every year. You don't know.
Andrea?
Andrea Küster from Germany. We stayed in contact with a caller where we stayed a night, and he set up a dance for us, and just last minute he found out there will be class just 45 minutes away from there. So he canceled that dance, and that's the best he can do, because it's important that the regional callers stay together and work together. And it doesn't matter that we are from Germany. We were on a trip, and it would be nice to call for other dancers, but it was more important that the callers and dancers work together from the area.
That will happen. Trevor, you had your hand
It
up.
is that, to me, in my personal opinion, it is that attitude that takes a caller a lot farther than the attitude of, "What'd you cancel my dance for?"
Yeah, because, you're not going to catch flies, with vinegar. And then Bob. Oh, I'm sorry. Trevor, go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. The young lady right here. Thank you.
Okay, Trevor Day from
After Trevor, okay.
Manchester, England. You do need to be very careful if you're calling in a foreign country, particularly in the UK. On there, they need to know when you're coming in, where you are staying every night, whether you are working, and the venue you are working at.
And who is they?
That's the people which will stop you coming through.
Federal gatekeepers.
That's it. Yep. And you have to have all of that paperwork in place on there, signed off on there. Then that copy has to be with the person when they come through immigration. And if they haven't got that on there, then they won't get through.
Yeah.
And we've had a number of American callers on there that have got through as far as the gate on there, said, yeah, come in to call a square dance on there. They said, where's your paperwork? Hadn't got it. Bye-bye.
Oh, yeah, I've heard some stories.
Oh, yeah.
Right here?
Yes, my name is Amy Levine. I'm Art's wife from Hagerstown, Maryland. I was wondering about if you're staying at somebody else's home, have you had any problems with that? Well, like we did that recently. We stayed in it. She had a beautiful home. Everything was just fine. But, somewhere in the back of your mind, you might have the Bates Motel or something, because you don't know these people the first time. I guess once you've stayed in somebody's home. But, you're kind of relying on somebody else. And, you would hope that everything's great. But, there's always that little thing in the back of your mind. Or also, too, maybe they can't do it the next year, I guess then you get a hotel. But I just kind of wanted to know if anybody's had any major problems with that.
In 44 years of calling, the bad experiences I've had staying in people's houses, I can count on one hand. It just doesn't happen. And there was, in one case, and it was years and years and years and years and years ago, I slept on the bed that their kids slept on, and it was a water bed with no heater. I hung over the edges on all four sides. Yes, I did. But I had to sleep fully clothed, and I said, the bed's kind of cold. Well, one of them slept in it subsequently and said, holy smokes, we've been letting our kids sleep in that cold bed?
Speaking about overnights like that, somebody had mentioned, and I think Mike reinforced it, some callers don't like staying at other people's houses because they just don't. I don't stay at a lot of people's houses because lots of times I'm traveling and I sort of like my own space, or if I'm doing work, that's just a personal preference. There are some places around the country I'll stay because it's like, I feel really comfortable with the people. I know them. Or they say, oh, by the way, we have the mother-in-law house in the back. You have the whole house to yourself. It's like, oh, that's great, But that's rare, but it does happen. But that's a personal choice. And I guess, when you don't know these people, most of the time you don't, you could be staying, you don't know. I'd say 95 or 98% of the time, the people are wonderful. There are clubs like, the Waterloo Squares in Austin. They'll always say, we have a caller I don't know what the name of the committee is, where you can stay with one of the dancers. And I've stayed with some of the dancers there from the club, and they organize that ahead of time. They say, you're going to be staying with, would you like to stay with, John and Mary or something? And I have, and they dance on Tuesday nights, and that's worked out. But you could save a lot of money by staying at people's houses, but if you don't, I know callers who won't stay at anyone's houses. That's just their personal preference. We had Marty, then Andrea.
You meet a lot of nice people by staying at their houses. You
Absolutely.
don't get to know any other way, and those can be some of your best supporters.
Yeah, Marty from North Carolina again. On that recent trip that I was talking about, I had people give me, they were working people, they give me the pass entry code to their house and said, when you leave, make sure you lock the door. And a year ago, I had somebody give me their house key. I mean, you don't find that type of rapport build up in any other profession that I know of. Where, and back to Ms. Levine's question and an answer to that is this, that if it's the first time that we're staying at a house, they don't know us either. There's that implied trust that square dancing inherently gives you, that if you're a square dancer or a square dance caller, you're good people. And I mean, how many times have you been to a dance when you see a purse sitting over there in the corner and nobody ever touches it? There's an implied honesty and professionalism within the square dance community, which if we break that or breach that, then we got a bad reputation.
Yeah.
So.
Ed?
And likewise, keeping the reputation of keeping your dates and not just not showing up for a dance. But also, the other thing I wanted to go back to networking. I found a good way to network and get other bookings is to offer first nighters. Beginner nights for your church or the local kids club or something where you're exposed to people and doing a first nighter. And that takes a lot of skill rather than a prepared dance of, another program. But then moving on, you never know who's in that group that say, hey, my caller just retired and he's quit calling and we really need somebody. That might be a good way to reach out also to get other dates.
Yeah, that's a good idea too. First Andrea and then Lynn.
Well, if you have the reputation of making all your dances, and you over and over and over and over again, when you have to miss one, you call somebody, they're going to believe you. And it's a good thing because I got stuck in the elevator last weekend. Yeah, I was on my way to call. The 11 o'clock workshop, I think it was, plus DPD, right? Owasca. Yeah, it was. I'm in elevator number 1. Thunk, right at the mezzanine level. And I've got the couple that, I had witnesses. The couple that drove me down from New Jersey was in that elevator at the time, and so was the lady that was head of housekeeping. And she's like, we're stuck in the elevator. Copy? Okay, yes. What about the room count? I said, I'll give you the room count when I get out of the elevator. What about room 16, 40, and 13? I'll give you the room count when I get out of the elevator. I'm stuck on the elevator with clients.
Yeah, that was no accident. We wanted you to be late for that. Andrea? Right in front of you.
Andrea Küster from Germany again. We traveled a lot and tried to stay as much as we can with other dancers or callers. It's always an interesting experience. You remember that much better, and they keep you in their mind, and so they try to stay in contact with you, and that's really great.
It is. Lynn and then Bob.
Lynn from Kansas City. I have a couple comments. First, I do some regional traveling, and I used to drive home at night, no matter how late it was. And now I'm getting old, and I don't do that anymore. And most of the houses that I've stayed at in the last 5 years are nicer than mine. So anywhere they want to put me up, I go for it. But in our area, we have club callers, and as I understand it, that is rather unique. If you are the caller for a specific club, you call their dances, you teach their lessons. If they do a demo, you do that. We don't bring in traveling callers to call for our clubs. We've kind of gotten a bad reputation over the years for being a closed area, but that's because there's no need for it. So after I started calling, if somebody called me and said, hey, I'm coming through your area, can you set me up a dance? We set up a special. It's not our club dance, it's a special dance. Had a guy that used to come in every year, and he called me and he said, I need this dance on this date. And I said, I can't do it. Well, why not? I said, because I've already got somebody the night before. It's the week before the National. Within 50 miles, there's already 4 trail-through dances. It's just too much. And he just kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and I kept saying no because I knew it would kill everybody. You know, we already really had too many. Went to a dance one night, and they said something about this dance, and I said, well, I'm not having him this year. You're not? That dance canceled? And I said, don't know about a dance at all. I didn't cancel one, and we just didn't schedule. So then the rumor goes around that his dance is canceled. And I got a nasty email, and it's like, I didn't set him up. Come to find out, he went to the gal that gets the hall for me, went through her. She got the hall. He set up his own dance on the night that I told him we can't do it. He got 2 squares, and when people found out the story of how that dance occurred, he now no longer calls in Kansas City. Yeah, and he'd been coming through 2 or 3 times a year for as long as I've been dancing.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's a great way of not how to tour. You know?
Exactly. That's my best example of a no-no.
That was a good one.
Bob Riggs right here.
Bob Riggs, Centennial, Colorado. In our area, if you're going to call outside of Denver, you're traveling 3 or 4 hours. And so staying overnight for an evening dance is often. I don't think I've ever stayed in a hotel. I've always stayed with people. I will say one thing is if you do that, you have to think about the fact that unless the doors close to the place you're staying, you're still on stage for all intents and purposes. You're still networking. So there's that thing you have to keep in your head is that you're still on in that context. If you go to a hotel or you get the grandma's house in the backyard, now you can kick back and you really are a little bit different. And so I understand that totally. I've never stayed in a place that's bad. I've always stayed with great people. I've had people where the housemate of the lady that owned the house, she was gone, but they put us up anyway at last minute because I was expecting to go home because they hadn't prearranged it. Usually they prearrange it. The other aspect is when I do that traveling, I will offer to help them with their class. I will offer to do an afternoon workshop. I will offer to do extra things besides just the dance portion of it. And sometimes they can take me up on it and sometimes they can't. It helps me because usually it brings in a little extra dollars to do that. And often it helps them. The last time I went to Salida, I ended up spending an hour and a half working with their class that was underway. And that helped them, it helped me, and so it was another terrific experience. And so I enjoy doing that, and I travel all over the state of Colorado and up into Wyoming and South Dakota and so on. So I'm not a full-fledged traveling caller, right, but I'm one of those regional guys that's trying to branch out.
Sure. Art right here.
Talking of that, Art Levine again from Hagerstown, Maryland. Dealing with, do you prepare well, obviously you would prepare, but is it important to know regional differences for regional things that, like for instance, New England, I originally come from there, so I know they hold their ocean waves with forearms. They don't stir the bucket normally. So is it important to know the regional differences when you go into a region?
Absolutely.
Mike? Yeah, okay, go ahead, Mike.
Well, on the one hand, the forearm versus the palm, that's important because that affects your timing.
Exactly.
That affects your timing. In terms of stir the bucket, I did that in Oregon. I had a guy yell up and said, "We don't do that here." And I said, "You do now."
I always do that.
Years ago in New England, when I learned to dance in the 70s, we always stirred the bucket. That was just a New England, it was just a thing we did in New England. And then I sort of got away with it, And then, things like stir the buckets and stuff, if they do it, that's fine. I mean, I don't really get hung up on stuff like that. I mean, I'm more concerned about calling a great dance and entertaining for the night. If they stir the bucket, fine. If they don't, I don't give it much thought. Ed?
Another thing to that point about different stylings in the different areas is when the dancers give out verbal flourishing. That can really throw your timing if you're not accustomed to hearing that. And they're all out there. First of all, you're trying to hear what they said, like if it was relevant to what you just said to them. And if it's not relevant to what you just said, but it's still going on, that can really screw you up. And so you have to be aware of still being on stage and being the performer up there without being like, what is going on?
Oh, yeah, and one of the things I see in certain areas, and I know I'm sure many of you have seen it, and Mike has certainly seen it, and I forget till they first do it when I come back to the areas, like you say, heads or sides, square through, and they just pair off. And they do the patty cake thing and everything. And there's sometimes you'll get a whole square of them that they stay together the whole night, and they do that the whole time. Now, I know there's callers who say, oh, I know how to break that. We'll just say, but on the third hand, do this, or square through 5 or something. I don't want to do those kind of things because I don't want to look like the bad guy. If that's what they do, that's their area, that's their situation. Their callers have to deal with it. I'm not a fan of it, but I'm there for the night, and I got a bigger venue to deal with than just two couples doing that.
See, I don't mind tormenting somebody like that as long as the square isn't broken.
Yeah.
As long as the square doesn't break down. One of my favorites is when the heads promenade halfway in a singing call. I saw they crowd down the middle. I saw one guy crowd down the middle, but he got crowded down. His partner got through, and after I said, heads promenade, and I let him do it. I said, a quarter. There's absolutely no smooth way that man can get through all the way around to the right. Learn your choreo so you can get out of that.
Well, we have to sort of wrap it up, gang. Any other comments or questions? This has been great. Yep. And we have a hand in the back, too.
I'm Jerry Wilson from here in Virginia. Talk to me a little bit about scheduling. How far ahead do you normally schedule? How far ahead do you find clubs wanting to schedule?
That varies by the club and the organization. Certain clubs, I've got booked 4 years in advance, and they're on tour. But the other ones are say, hey, we'll do the date every year when you come through at this time. We can move the date this Tuesday or that Tuesday, sort of thing. So that really is specific. But that's why you need to get your big one scheduled 3 years out. It's going to pay most of your bills, then build your other dances around it.
Yeah, especially like festivals. Like they'll say, well, our state festival, well, we're booked for 16, 17, and 18, but, we're hiring for 19. And you just, you never say no if it's a big enough event. So that's fine. Especially if it's way out there. I always joke saying, oh, I'm sure I have that date free, Yes.
Virgil Forbes from Maryland again. Having started with the teen clubs and the singles clubs back in the 70s, one of the things I learned was dancers come to a dance to have fun. The caller should not get in the way of them having fun. One of my current clubs, it's traditional, last tip, every promenade is a scatter promenade. And if I have a guest caller in, I just say, expect it, it's going to happen. It's how they do it. But the whole thing is, they're coming to be entertained, they're coming to have fun, and the caller has to be part of the fun, or you don't come back.
Yeah. Any final comments or questions? Mike, you have anything final? Right behind you, Trevor.
Just be very careful on there with the national holidays, particularly those that move.
Yeah, that's a key point.
I've come unstuck on there, particularly with Easter and with CALLERLAB. That is on there. I suddenly find on there that has happened, not this year on there, but the previous year on there, is I was driving the night before I was due to fly out on there, 6 hours as a journey on there, and then you've got to get back and get up the airport in time.
Mike, final comments?
I am very grateful for all the input in this room. Everything that was said in this room today was beneficial to all, I think, and I appreciate it greatly.
Yeah, my final comment is even if you just want to venture on a little bit, say you're calling in just your own area, it's sort of refreshing sometimes to get out of your area, do a couple of dances or whatever. But then, what you find is when you get back home, you sort of appreciate what you have too. It's a nice breather. But we would encourage you that I know Mike and I are always open for questions. I get emails and stuff from people. So if you've got any other questions or concerns about traveling, don't be afraid to reach out to us. We'll certainly help you as much as we can. Remember, business cards, network. CallerLab is a great area, great time of year to be handing out cards, making new relationships, and maybe talking about, and reciprocate too. Don't just always accept someone to do something for you. Do something for them, even if it's a year or two down the road. Be grateful for whatever you can get. How about a nice hand, Mr. Mike Sikorsky? We'd like to thank everybody for coming. Enjoy the rest of the convention.
Nice hand for Ken Ritucci.
Thank you.